Are we sick of Nick Saban yet? Because he's trying to make us feel that way.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
For those that don't know, Caleb also does a lot of work with the political realm. By the way, today's tough question is brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. So he's well aware in both realms, sports and politics, that Nick Saban and the SEC are going to Congress to lobby for NIL regulation. To the best of my knowledge, Off the Hook Sports broke this last year, and that was at SEC Media Days. We'll be broadcasting from there in July. But I asked Mike Slav, I asked Greg Sankey really simply, I said, what kind of timeline are we looking at? And the first thing he said is, you got the midterm elections coming up. And I'm like, whoa, he's thinking like way down the road. And then he's like, you got the real elections coming up in 2024. I'm like, whoa. And I was thinking a matter of days or weeks. The issue is not what the NCAA should do, Caleb. The issue is what is legal. And I know Nick Saban is trying to step to the forefront of this, and I understand that he should do so as the elder statesman. But this is way bigger than Nick Saban. So your thoughts on Nick Saban, and I'll ask you just quite frankly, have you had enough of Nick Saban trying to influence the SEC? Because he's done it with speed of play. He's done it in just about every shape, form, and fashion you can imagine. I think he derailed the SEC spring meetings. And I think Nick Saban's influence is why we don't have a permanent schedule in place. I'll go ahead and tell you firsthand, I'm ready for him to step aside from a policy standpoint. Be a great coach. Coach at Alabama as long as you want to, because I think it's better when the programs are great. And Alabama has been great. But I've had it with him being the voice of the SEC. I'm done with that. I think it's self-serving, and I'm good. I'm ready to move on. Caleb, thoughts?
I disagree, believe it or not. And I'll tell you why. So his influence, he didn't derail the 9-game schedule alone. Jimmy, we couldn't get him. We had technical issues yesterday speaking with him, but a lot of schools were against it because a lot of schools are rightly, again, upset about the poorly negotiated contract that Greg Sankey got from ESPN, and they want a bigger payout, meaning it's more important to make sure they get to a bowl. Also, was his attempt to slow the game self-serving? Yes, but it didn't work. Nobody listened to him. The game still is speeding up. This going to Congress, I'm going to be honest with you, Dave, it's not self-serving at all. Now, people think it's self-serving, but I think it's a genuine thought on where college football could be, because here's the issue with NIL. Every state has different laws, so there's no uniform standard. People thinking that Saban is worrying about this for himself. Hey, newsflash, everybody. Nick Saban just scored the greatest recruiting class in the history of college football by 3 different recruiting services and metrics. And that was in the heart of NIL. So NIL is not hurting Nick Saban or Alabama at all. Also, another thing I wanted to bring up, Dave, that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. If you're Nick Saban or Kirby Smart or Brian Kelly, even at LSU, when LSU's loaded with talent in Louisiana, you don't really need... don't get me wrong, you need NIL as a baseline, but you don't have to outbid for talent, because you know this, Dave, covering recruiting. Players,
a guy that's playing for Tennessee might have been outbid for talent.
You might get a couple
from Louisiana.
Okay, fair enough. You might get a couple, but by and large, when it's Alabama or Georgia. Question, Dave: When do people with major football ties start targeting these elite athletes? They're 14 by the time they're being targeted, right?
The uber like weird,
the anywhere guys.
Okay, the anywhere guys. Okay, like the Arch Mannings of the world. Yeah, everybody knows who he is the day he's born, but mostly they don't start to get targeted until probably 8th grade, freshman. My thing is with Saban, though, here's my issue with Saban. I don't trust anything he says because I think he has ulterior motives. So he may be going with the best interest of the SEC at heart to Congress, and he may be doing that. That's great. But I don't think he's done that necessarily on his other decisions. So I'm just ready to move on. I'm not ripping him. I'm not questioning his intentions. I'm just ready for this to move on.
I think he has the most credibility to speak on NIL, though, with Congress, if you're going to have a coach go, not just because of his success, but because he also just had the #1 ranked recruiting class in the country. So if any coach has less incentive to change the current structure, it's Nick Saban right now.
Okay, but why would he have greater insight than Josh Heupel or Brian Kelly, two schools that are mastering the NIL game right now? I mean, to me, they have more insight and they know the way things are working. They know that a guy like Jordan Matthews might be coming to them asking for money, coming out of the state of Louisiana, maybe.
I think Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly secretly don't really want change in NIL. I mean, because they're kind of
something has to get regulated at some point, right?
Yeah, but why would they ask for it to be regulated when they're benefiting from it the most? Like yes, it probably will, but I think they want to take advantage of it for as long as possible until it is.
Yeah, I guess when I look at the situation they're in, if I'm Greg Sankey and I wanted to go to someone that had a good feel for NIL, see, I think Alabama put together a really highly rated class. I'm not suggesting they didn't pay anybody. I'm sure they did, or most, but I don't think that they had to go out and pay a ton because I think they relied on their history. There is still something to be said for that.
And there's also, if most of these players are smart, they realize Alabama, their focus is the NFL, which is worth way more money than the NIL. So,
yeah,
I mean,
as John Calipari says, you're tripping over nickels to cost you millions, which is a really good saying. So, yeah, I mean, I think Alabama does that for you. I would just be interested in a fresh perspective. I'm ready for that. And I don't know who else that would be. If it's not Nick Saban, who gives you a fresh perspective of the way things are in the SEC with NIL? To me, that's Heupel and Brian Kelly. And Kelly hasn't been in the long, obviously, but they're having success there. And I know that they're doing a ton of NIL stuff that's actually more proactive in some cases than what Tennessee's doing currently.
I could see that. And
wouldn't you like to see his perspective? Because he's been at Notre Dame as well.
And y'all say I'm the Brian Kelly homer.
No, I mean, I think there's a habit of just going to Nick Saban, and I don't think you have to do that.
Well, let's not forget the two senators most involved in this. It's a bipartisan group. It's Tommy Tuberville, who's a Republican, and Joe Manchin, a Democrat. Tuberville represents Alabama. It's probably more connected to Saban than any senator in up there, except for Joe Manchin, who was a childhood friend of Nick Saban's in West Virginia. So that's probably why they're bringing him up. And I don't think if you're Tommy Tuberville, you would only be connected to Hugh Freeze. Nobody wants Hugh Freeze going to Congress to lobby for any policy.
No, that's true. But he might have a lot in common with some of the congressmen. Today's tough question brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Andy Mason is where I go to buy a home, and I'm about to do so because he's incredible. Over 40 years of experience, best service, best price in the biz, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. So for the record, today's tough question. Are you tired of Nick Saban being the mouthpiece of the conference? You say no, you're good with it. You're golden, you got no problem.
I'm golden. I got no problem because I think this particular issue is one that he has the most credibility on of any coach out there.
Wow. All right. I thought you'd be with me on this one, Caleb. I'm a little hurt. I'm
sorry.
That's okay.
And y'all know we don't manufacture debates, guys, on this show. So
no, we don't.